You don't really think that your oral microbiome can be fatal, can kill you?
No. And even I think as a dentist, we weren't really taught how important bacteria was or how important the mouth was for the rest of the body. The only one that we ever learned, and a lot of people would know this one, is that if you have heart surgery, you can't actually have a hygiene for about 6 months after the heart surgery.
A dental hygiene?
Yes. And the reason for that is because you're at a very high risk of something called infective endocarditis. So this is oral bacteria which travels down to a faulty heart valve and can actually cause death. So we know that, but we never really look at it for other diseases or other problems.
I want to take a step back before we go through the links between our oral microbiome and all of these diseases, but also I really want to also talk about what we can do about it, because I've got so many questions around it. I've got all of these products down below my chair, from mouthwashes to toothpaste to all these kinds of things, which I want to talk about as well. But just taking a step back to something that one of my guests previously was telling me about, I think it was James Nestor. He was telling me that the mouth itself and the jaw, because of processed foods, is an abnormal shape. And when I say abnormal, I mean in relation to how it was supposed to develop, because we're eating so many processed foods which which are designed to be easy to chew. The mouth itself and the jaw have changed. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, 100%. So there was a man called Weston Price, and he was a dentist, and he basically suspected that. And he was like, this is strange. Why is it that people who are in more industrialized and westernized areas have higher levels of decay and they have loads of crowding? So they had basically lots of crowding of the teeth and smaller jaws. And so he basically traveled around the world and he looked at lots of different tribes, villages, countries, and he compared the teeth of, for example, twins. One twin would be in a very industrialized, westernized area, and the other one was not. And what he found was that in the twins who were in these non-industrialized areas, they were eating harder foods, they were having less sugar, and actually their jaws developed a lot better. So they didn't have crowding, they had perfect teeth actually, and they had no decay compared to the children or the twins who were in more industrialized areas. And it is because our food now has become so processed. A lot of children are not having hard foods. And so we don't develop the jaws and the muscles at an early age. And so the teeth haven't changed size. The teeth are exactly the same size as they were previously. But what we're seeing is that those teeth don't have any space to grow anymore. And that's when we're getting crowding.
And can you see that in any of those models?
So in this model, you can actually see at the very back. So a lot of people will have wisdom teeth. And one of the biggest issues at the moment is that a lot of people have impacted wisdom teeth. So this is basically, imagine your teeth are all upright. Your wisdom tooth is coming out at a completely horizontal angle and it's pushing on the rest of the teeth. Mm-hmm. It's an absolute nightmare as a dentist to take out. It's even more of a nightmare for a patient to have to endure. But also we're seeing that there are a lot more impacted wisdom teeth in the last 30, 40 years than there were previously.
Because the diets have changed.
Because the diets have changed. A lot more children are needing orthodontic treatment now as well, just because they have crowded teeth are overlapping. And so they need braces to straighten those teeth out. If you think about cavemen didn't have dentists, they didn't have braces, they didn't even use toothpaste, but they didn't die from gum disease or decay or crowded teeth. So it's been something in our industrialized or more kind of westernized diet that has changed that.
My wisdom tooth is coming through on my left side at the moment, and I think actually also my right side at the same time. And I'm 32 years old now, so I'm like, why the hell am I growing teeth at 32 years old? I thought I was on my way out or something. So I got two questions just before we crack on, which is, what the hell is a wisdom tooth? Why is it called a wisdom tooth? And why is it coming through at 32 years old?
So we have teeth erupting at different kind of times of our lives. So usually you have your baby teeth, they will erupt up to the age of about 6 or 7 years old. And then you have your adult teeth coming through, and usually they will stop erupting around 12 years old. And then you have nothing, you're chilling, you have nothing until about maybe 18, 19 years old, and that's where you start to get your wisdom teeth. The name behind wisdom teeth, from what I understand, is because it erupts when you're older. It's when you have more wisdom and you're more wise.
So I'm wise now.
So you're just very wise.
Okay, makes sense.
And so some people will get it at 18. Some people don't have any wisdom teeth. Some people will have wisdom teeth which erupt perfectly and are all completely fine. And others will have their wisdom tooth erupt at 32 years old and maybe be a little bit impacted or cause problems. So they're also very strange teeth. They're very unpredictable the way that they are.
Is there any evolutionary basis for why we need them? There must be some kind of evolutionary reason for them.
Not that I understand. What is also happening is that apparently, and this is some research, is that less people are having wisdom teeth because more children or adults are getting their wisdom teeth taken out. And as evolution goes, eventually some people are actually not having wisdom teeth at all because their ancestors haven't had wisdom teeth. So why would they have wisdom teeth? But overall, no, there's no real need for wisdom teeth. I never like to take them out unless needed because, I mean, more teeth, the better. And you never know, if you have to have something taken out, then we can use your wisdom tooth for something.
If I were to look at my ancestors from 500 years ago, you said they don't have dentists, they don't have toothpaste and all those kinds of things, but you also said they don't have tooth decay.
Yeah.
Does that not therefore mean that I shouldn't need a dentist and I shouldn't need toothpaste or mouthwash or floss?
If you had a caveman diet, then potentially you might not need toothpaste, floss, or even a toothbrush. And there's a lot of argument as to, there's a lot of people out there saying, no, you don't need to use any toothpaste, you don't need floss, anything like that. And fine, go ahead, do that, but only if you are going to be eating, meat, or raw meat sometimes, and you're only drinking water and you're not having anything in your diet which has any sugar or carbohydrates in it.
I mean, doesn't that speak to what the perfect diet is supposed to be? Can't we tell what the perfect diet is supposed to be by looking at the mouth?
Yeah. So another issue is that with a lot of the food that we eat now, they have a lot more sugar in them, and that will impact the acidity of your saliva. And essentially what decay is you have sugar or you have some sort of carbohydrates, and you've got this bacteria in your mouth, and they feed on that sugar. And as they feed on that sugar, they release acid. And if that acid is left there, then it can cause demineralization of your teeth. And that demineralization will end up with decay.
Okay, so let's talk about the personal oral microbiome. Is my oral microbiome different from, say, Jack's over there and from my girlfriend's?
Yes, massively.
Massively different?
Yes. Maybe massively, I would say. So one of the issues that I used to have was I was doing lots of oral microbiome testing, and I would have, let's say you and your girlfriend do an oral microbiome test, and both of you, I would see your results and they would come out pretty much the same because we're only looking at certain bacteria. We can't look at all 700. So we would look at the top 20 bacteria that cause problems. So I would look at both of them, and then I would look inside your mouths, and one of you, I don't know who in this case, had raging gum disease and terrible oral health, and the other person would be completely fine. So then I realized that actually it's not just bacteria that causes disease or problems, it's how your body responds to that bacteria and the strains of bacteria that you have as well. So for every bacteria, there'll be multiple strains. And some of those strains can be really aggressive and really horrible for your mouth. And other strains are completely fine and are not going to cause you any problems. So when I developed my test, what we did is we looked at strains. So we looked at the strains of certain bacteria, and we would be able to differentiate between patients who had the really bad strains and the really good strains. But then also we looked at the ratio of good and bad bacteria in someone's mouth, so their diversity, as well as their genetic mutations and also their inflammation. So when you put all of it together and it's like a puzzle piece, then you can actually have a better insight into someone's oral health. So I guess my answer is that everyone's oral microbiome is a little bit different, but it's also how your body responds to that microbiome and bacteria that really dictates whether or not you're going to have disease or problems.
So you could be someone who takes care of their teeth really, really well, but still have a bad oral microbiome relationship with the rest of your body effectively.
Yeah. And okay. I see it every day. And we have a lot of patients who suffer from terrible gum disease, and they come to me and they brush 3 times a day. They've never touched a cigarette. They have immaculate oral hygiene. They eat very well. but they have terrible gum disease. And for those patients, they might have genetic mutations that predispose them to gum disease and to inflammation. So even the smallest amount of bacteria, their body responds in a very aggressive and inflammatory, destructive way, which can cause disease.
When I was speaking to, I think it was Tim Spector about the gut microbiome, he was telling me that the gut microbiome turns over, i.e. the bacteria dies every couple of days or weeks or something. How often does the oral microbiome turn over, and why does that matter?
So what's interesting or different between the oral and gut microbiome? The oral microbiome, if someone doesn't go in there and mechanically disrupt the bacteria and the plaque in your mouth, then that bacteria can stay forever. So the gut, what happens is you've got something called peristalsis, you've got movement. So the bacteria moves, it changes, it regenerates, there's turnover. In the mouth, so the teeth are the only non-shedding surfaces in the whole body. So that
non-shedding surfaces.
So imagine if you never had a shower in your life, you would still self-wash because the skin cells would shed. But if you never brushed your teeth, then your teeth are not shedding. They're going to stay like that. So that bacteria will just keep on growing and growing and growing and growing, and you'll get this really thick plaque. So that's why actually the oral microbiome, you need to mechanically remove that bacteria. And that's why brushing your teeth is super important, or using the correct toothpaste, or et cetera, or going and seeing your hygienist, because you need to mechanically remove that bacteria quite regularly.
Okay. And the two ways, I was reading in your work, it said that the two ways that oral health impacts overall health are by the spreading of bacteria, and the other sort of central issue is it causes inflammation. So on this point of spreading bacteria, I'm always concerned, this is a bit of a superstitious thing, but any time that I'm sick, I'm always like, part of me is like, don't swallow. Because in my head, I think if I'm sick in my mouth, or if I've got like a sore throat or something, I'm like, if I swallow it, the rest of my body's going to get sick. It's super superstitious, but is there any truth to any of this?
So not from just being sick like a common cold. And it's actually really interesting. I had a patient yesterday, and bless him, he's very young, 7 years old. And he had exactly that same mindset. He just randomly woke up one day and he said, this is kind of gross. Why am I swallowing my saliva? There's all these bad bugs and gross things in my saliva, and I'm swallowing it every day, and it's traveling to the rest of my body at 7. And so what he ended up doing was refusing to swallow his own saliva. And so he would basically just dribble, and he would just wipe the saliva off with a sleeve, or he'd carry a towel with him and just wipe it. So bless him, he had big rash around his face. And it was a bit of a weird moment for me, because I was like, you're kind of right. Like, I mean, it is a bit weird, especially as a child, to sit there and think like, yeah, you've got 700 different bacteria, 2 billion bacteria overall, and then you're swallowing it and it can travel elsewhere to the rest of the body. So yes, in short, yes, bacteria from your mouth, when you swallow it, it can travel elsewhere to the rest of the body. However, a lot of the bacteria dies. So the acid in the stomach can kill a lot of the bacteria. So it's only the really, really bad bacteria that are able to survive and cause problems. And that's why it's so important that you have a good oral microbiome and you balance it well.
And the other central way that it can cause negative impacts to your overall health is via inflammation. What is the link between inflammation and my oral microbiome?
So it's something that we call low-grade chronic inflammation. And imagine, so you've got this delicate balance of bacteria in your mouth, which is your microbiome. And we all have bad bacteria in our mouths, but most of us hopefully have better levels or higher levels of the good bacteria. So there's always that balance. And what happens in an imbalanced oral microbiome is that shift changes. So you get higher levels of bad bacteria and you don't have enough good bacteria. These bad bacteria, firstly, yes, they can travel elsewhere to the rest of your body, as you discussed. The second is that they can release inflammatory markers. So they basically release inflammation. And this inflammation can travel from your mouth to the rest of your body and contribute to inflammation elsewhere. So for example, if you had rheumatoid arthritis and then you had inflammation from your gums, that inflammation from your gums is making your arthritis in your wrists worse. So it's contributing to it. Now, what's also interesting, and that's why it's called low-grade chronic inflammation, is often you wouldn't even know that you have it. I have so many patients who say, oh, my gums bleed, but that's normal. If your eye bled or if your foot was bleeding every day, you would be worried and you would think, actually, there's inflammation here, there's a problem here. But so many people have bleeding gums and they don't understand that bleeding gums is a sign. It's your gum screaming to you saying that I have inflammation, and that inflammation can travel. And then the third mechanism as well, so there's one more, is it's damage to your blood vessels. So again, the same bad bacteria in your mouth, it releases these enzymes, these toxic enzymes, and they can travel through the rest of your body, through your blood vessels, and they can actually damage your blood vessels. So these blood vessels are not able to dilate and constrict as well as they used to.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.